Tanzu Tuesdays. Your host, Tiffany Jenigan.
All right, and we are live.
Hey everyone! If you missed our last session, you may be missing the pew 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 from Bob.
Sorry, how'd that go again?
Pew 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 lasers. Happy?
Very happy.
So Bob decided that he would leave off. He started his first day at Redis yesterday. So we'll miss him, and you'll have, in order to hang out with Bob, or previously at least, you can watch our previous videos on Tanzu.tv, and maybe we'll somehow pull him over here some other time.
Yeah, we're still great friends with the folks at Redis,
Yeah.
so I'm sure we'll have chances to get Bob back on. And then maybe we should do a greatest hits Bob video, one of those in memorial type videos you do when someone departs a TV show.
You'll have to show me how that goes. All right, so today we have Bob Glithero, who is a senior manager of product marketing for VMware Tanzu Data Services. We have Pulkit Chandra, who currently leads the Tanzu GemFire product team. And we have a special guest, Nick Vallely, who is a product manager for GemFire. They're going to be talking about fast data in the cloud environment. If you want to check out what the description of it, you can go to tanzu.tv/Tuesdays/33, or you could just go to tanzu.tv and go through it to get to 33. So,
hey Tiffany, old friend of the show, Sweet Killer 9, is in chat.
I see that. Yeah.
And I think he just learned the hard way that Bob is no longer with us.
Yep. So for the rest of you who don't know, Sweet Killer 9's been coming to our episodes since when we first started doing this. So it's always cool to see them when they show up online, and they show up even with being in Europe. So the time zones. So it's been a little bit, but hi Sweet Killer 9. Yeah, so I'm going to pass it off to Paul to do an update of what are some of the upcoming videos and things that we're doing over the next couple weeks or so.
All right, so a couple of interesting news items from the Kubernetes community. First of all, up this weekend, starting Friday, we have the Kubernetes Contributor Celebration, which if you are a contributor or are around the Kubernetes and CNCF communities, that is definitely something you would be interested in. And you can go to kates.dev, K8s.dev, for details on how to sign up for that. And I'm actually
bring family.
You can bring family and friends and pets. And if nothing else, we're going to be playing games like Among Us and various other things. Animal Crossing. I think there's a community awards show happening. And then on Saturday, because it's going to be running all weekend, I'm actually running the Great CNCF Baking Show. So we've basically got a bunch of folks from the community that are going to be competing head-to-head in a baking competition. No idea how it's going to work or if it's going to be successful. I'm actually trying to figure out the tech to make it actually work right as we speak. But it's going to be fun nonetheless. And then right on the heels of that, on Sunday the 13th, is the end of the CFP for KubeCon North America.
EU.
No, EU, that's right. Europe's first. So if you are interested in speaking at KubeCon, you'd better get a wriggle on and write your CFPs. And then just general Tanzu TV news. So next week on Tanzu Tuesdays, we'll be talking about challenges and opportunities for Kubernetes at the edge with Gabri and Glenio. And then on between chair and keyboard, I was trying to figure out how to say it wrong, so I'd keep running with Bob's inability to say that show name, but I think I got it right. Nate's going to be talking with Raju Gandhi. And then just tomorrow, for code, we're going to have our very own Jakob Pilimon, who is without a doubt the most handsome developer advocate anywhere. He's incredible. And he will be live coding the refactoring of an application to use event sourcing in Spring, of course. So I think that is all the news and interesting things coming up. Tiffany, anything to add?
Not that I can think of. Do we have this, or did you mention Tanzu Talk?
Tanzu Talk. Well, I mean, that's like literally every single day. So I guess like every day, Kote does Tanzu Talk. He's quite an amusing fellow. So you will get learnings and giggles at the same time, which is always a good combination. Anyone else have anything newsworthy they want to mention before we kick off? No? All right. So let's flip over to presentation mode. I believe someone's going to share their screen. So go ahead and hit that button and we will get going.
Okay, so I don't get to grill them about random stuff?
Oh, yes, Tiffany, you're supposed to ask them questions and find out more about them. I'm getting ahead of myself. And it's your show and I'm sitting here running it. So how about you take over instead of me?
I'll make it quick since they're all prepped and ready to go now. Okay, so I guess if there was not a pandemic right now and you could be anywhere, like where would you go? Or stay home, either way.
I'll start, but it looks like Bob's already pointing at his location. I would probably head over to some Hawaiian island. Hopefully, sans kids, leave the four at home and enjoy some beach time.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, the shot says it all. I want to be here right now.
Nick, if you just leave food out for the kids, they're okay for a couple of weeks, right?
Food and water.
I'm sure the state of Oregon would really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably be at this time around. I'm generally in Dubai, waiting for Dubai Open to happen in a month. Watching that live. That's been my thing for many years now, but here we are.
Can you watch it virtually this year, or is it not happening?
I will definitely watch virtually, but it's a different thrill to actually be in the stadium and watch. Of course.
Yeah.
Tiffany, where would you be?
I think right now it also would have to be Hawaii, since people I know, actually I could probably technically do it now in the sense of that you can like get tested beforehand and then therefore go, but I'm too scared of planes right now. But yeah, probably Hawaii, because I haven't been since I was 7, so I barely remember it. And people keep talking about Hawaii, not just in this, but like several of my friends have talked about Hawaii recently, or one has been to Hawaii twice in the last like year or so. So I'm just like, I just need to go back and try to remember what the whole hype was for.
We keep talking about doing a team offsite in Hawaii, but apparently the folks that run the budget don't like that idea. So, you know,
I could see it totally being cheaper than some other places if you plan it right. It's probably just because it's not like connected to via land.
Yeah.
But yeah, that like one of the groups I was around at Amazon, they went to Hawaii every year as their offsite, but one of them also owned a place in Hawaii and just had everyone there. Okay, so Paul, what about you?
So I think I actually started the pandemic in Tokyo. So I think it would be kind of cool to end the pandemic there as well. It was actually weird because I was there as they were starting to shut things down. So I was there with my sister. And we would go to a museum, and the next day there would be an announcement that museum is closed. Now, I don't think it was our fault. I don't think they were closing because of us.
Yeah, okay.
But so we kind of, thankfully, it was as we were starting to wrap up the trip, so we didn't have to try to make, emergency plans to come home. But after that, I think it would be nice to, bookend this whole thing with another trip to Tokyo and do some of the things I did miss out on. Because they were closed, and otherwise just hang out with some of my friends over there.
Yeah, I changed my answer. It would be either like Tokyo or Shanghai. area because I've been talking about trying to go for at least to Tokyo for the last 30 years. And I got a Chinese passport back in
Visa?
2013. Visa, thank you. Visa. I wish I had a passport. Chinese visa in 2013 that only lasts for 10 years. And I'm like, I better make sure I go before it expires.
I'm only allowed to get 1-year visas to China. So I've got like, I think 5 visas in my passport right now. So I'm going to run out of pages in my passport pretty soon. For some reason, they only do the 10-year with the US. They don't do it with other countries.
And what's your citizenship? Or do you have more than one right now?
I have a couple. I have Australian and I have British. The British one used to be amazing back when Britain was part of the EU, but I haven't actually really traveled since Brexit fully happened, so I don't know how it's going to affect my ability to go other places. But yeah, at least with the Australian, everyone loves Australians, so I should still be able to get in places.
Cool. All right. Shall we transition now to actually having tech talk?
I don't know. This witty banter is so enjoyable. I want to keep it going forever, but I suppose we should get down to brass tacks. Well, I can't tell you how, what a pleasure it is to be joining you. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Bob Glithero, and I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Tanzu Data Services. So we cover a pretty broad portfolio of things from SQL databases to data warehousing to caching and in-memory data grids to messaging systems. So that's a lot of ground to cover. And as you can imagine, I spend a lot of my time kind of keeping up to date with research in the industry. And I'm a voracious consumer of Gartner research. And I came across a report that I thought had some neat elements in it that would set the stage for what you're going to hear today. So every October, Gartner publishes a research report, technical advice for data management professionals. And it's a kind of a look ahead to the coming year and what people can expect, what they think the big picture trends are. And as I was kind of flipping through the report, I saw a number of these that just are dovetail perfectly with some of the topics that we're going to talk about today. I mean, I can think of at least 3 of the top 5 that we'll be hitting on, in the course of this session. But the number one trend that they called out is this ongoing march to the cloud, but also with this notion of hybrid multi-cloud. So even though the hyperscale cloud providers, are still aware that they're going to have to support, on-premises workloads. And so they're kind of focusing on sort of these hybrid workloads. But one of the things that they're really telling their research base in their clients is that, they're expecting more and more database services now to run in containers, orchestrated by Kubernetes with a unified control plane. And that is reflected in our development philosophy. I mean, we recently developed and dropped a Kubernetes operator for Postgres. And I think have just announced one for GemFire as well within the last day or two. Open source Rabbit has just gone 1.0 on their Kubernetes operators. So it seems like a lot more of the data services are coming out have adopted the operator pattern for deploying backing services. And we see that, and that kind of gives you this notion of portability, or the ability to deploy on any environment that's kind of a standardized certified Kubernetes environment. So I'm pretty sure that's a trend that's going to continue marching on. In a related sense, they also call automation as being kind of a big trend. The idea that you're kind of getting away from these ticketing-based provisioning workflows and a lot of management overheads, kind of relieving the pressure on the data teams and the platform teams on administering products or just keeping the lights on to focus more and more time on the business initiatives. So tasks such as database configuration and monitoring are increasingly becoming programmatic through things like infrastructure as a code. And then another one of their tops is this ongoing adoption of event-driven architectures, kind of expanding beyond structured data and batch processing into events and multi-structured data with stream processing, which ties hand in glove with microservices architectures. So right off the top of the bat, I mean, GemFire is tailor-made for these to fit into these types of trends. And of course, there's still this ongoing importance of open source, as we saw a lot of the open source data projects kind of converging more and more with their commercial counterparts in terms of capability and support for enterprise features just baked right in. Postgres is a great example of this. With each release, it gets, they're nipping at the heels of Oracle even more and more and becoming a more viable Oracle replacement. And then, they also call out this concept of data ops. That's kind of increasingly important. So the idea that you have composable data pipelines, which, all of our products work with the Spring libraries, Spring Cloud Data Flow. So you have this ability to build pipelines in a very agile manner and reuse artifacts so you can reduce the time to develop, testing, maintaining, and debugging your products. So, it's gonna be very interesting to see, how this all continues to play out. But I think, the Tanzu data portfolio is very well positioned to help enterprise users kind of navigate this changing landscape. And so with that kind of as background, I'm going to turn it over to Pulkit to go through a deeper dive into Tanzu GemFire. And then Nick will give us kind of an overview of a demo where we're setting up GemFire in a Kubernetes setting. So if you'll bear with me 1 second, I'm going to share my screen and get us into presentation mode.
Awesome.
And hopefully everybody can see this.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you so much, Bob. Hi, everybody. I'm Pulkit Chandra. I lead the product team for Tanzu GemFire at Vmware. I've been focused on data and cloud-based product for more than a decade now, 15 years almost now, which is exciting. So today, let's get into Tanzu GemFire and its overview. After that, I will have my colleague, Nick, to go over a quick demo on Kubernetes. All right, let's kick it off. So first is, what is Tanzu GemFire? Let's just quickly define it for everybody. So it is a distributed in-memory database. It is specifically designed to live on the cloud on multi-kind of cloud kind of architecture that Bob talked about, and especially with underlying, changing nature of the cloud. That's where it's really designed to handle. So that what that means is that you could be having issues with your network, you could be having issues with your disk, and this database is designed to handle those and still keep on going. Now, we focus on a list of use cases. So if we can categorize it in, you could think of it like a session state caching. There are use cases related to changing the way data is changing. There are use cases related to pub sub or event-driven architecture, and ultimately use cases driven by how much high availability that I need in my architecture. So you can categorize a lot of use cases where GemFire fits into this picture. GemFire has a long history. So we have worked with many customers to ultimately implement these patterns over the course of more than 15 years since we've been around. Next slide. So there are multiple distributions of GemFire which are available. There are three currently which are in play. Number one is Tanzu GemFire for VMs. This is particularly our Tanzu application service offering. It runs on BOSH as an underlying platform. And historically, we used to call it Pivotal Cloud Cache before the acquisition. The second offering that got just released 2 days ago is Tanzu GemFire for Kubernetes. This is a GA release which is targeting a lot of Kubernetes environments. We are particularly focusing our design of our operator on upstream Kubernetes. Nick is going to go into more details of how this all looks like. And the third offering that we have is called Tanzu GemFire Standalone. It basically runs anywhere where Java is supported. Tanzu GemFire is written all in Java. So different operating systems, as long as they have a JDK or JVM running on top of it, Tanzu GemFire can run. This has been historically called Pivotal GemFire or VMware GemFire before that. and supports all these use cases that we talked about. Next slide, please. All right, let's talk about some of the categorization of the use cases. One of the most common things that I've seen with a lot of our customers over the years is some kind of website use cases or use cases where there is a lot of fetching of data, which doesn't change that often. So you can think of it like if you are visiting a healthcare provider website, on their website, you would see you might have some kind of doctor's copay that you own. How much is that? How much total money that you actually own? A lot of this data, which is constantly read but doesn't really change that much, can be served up in an in-memory database like GemFire. And this is perfect because it provides a lot of resiliency. So if you have some kind of surge because you're going through some kind of event, for example, when the offering for a lot of people in North America, when it opens, where insurance companies open a window where you can register yourself, change your election, this kind of particular surge in traffic helps quite a lot to have a very resilient in-memory database that is serving up the website. Next slide, please. Now, the second kind of data is beyond just a login session. So there could be things related to shopping cart experiences. So if you're on a on some kind of e-commerce website where you're saving a lot of data, the shopping cart data can be saved in an in-memory database where if there is a failure in the application, doesn't really impact or those events or that data which you're saving in your shopping cart doesn't really get lost, and you can have that available in your in-memory database. It also uses or can use the performance gains that it can actually get. Another thing that which is very useful is the load balancing aspect of the database. Tanzu GemFire is particularly designed to do the load balancing for the applications. So application don't really have to manage how many servers it's connecting to. It's just connecting to a cluster, and the cluster does the load balancing within it. And then it's extremely concurrent. So all the performance gains that you're getting out of it is because of the concurrency which is built into the design. It uses all the threads which are available to it. So if the underlying hardware has more threads and more CPUs, it's going to use it. It's a multi-threaded application. And it is scalable, and it's transparently scalable. That's something that Nick is going to go over and showcase you how easy it is to scale in the Kubernetes environment. Next slide, please. Another particularly interesting architectural aspect and a choice of Tanzu GemFire is that it is a highly concurrent system. So a lot like a SQL type of database, this key value data store or database is consistent as well. So if you think from a CAP theorem perspective, it's a CP system. That means it can handle partition, and it is a consistent system. From an availability perspective, it uses and harnesses the power of Kubernetes and the underlying platform to really showcase high availability, because if the pod is going down, Kubernetes quickly spins it back up and brings it back to healthy. The inherent design or a multi-leader design of GemFire will let the new node join and quickly distribute the data so that the system or the cluster, which is servicing all the load of these applications, are perfectly the way they are. So that kind of design and combination of platform, we really hit the high availability in the availability on the CAP theorem, and then we are consistent by nature. So each transaction or each write that goes through, it goes to the primary and the secondary servers all in a single transaction. As and when the application gets the acknowledgement back, it only gets it when the entire transaction is done. This particular design choice is very useful for certain type of applications, especially where a wrong data that can be serviced. If it is a highly available system, you can actually get a dirty read. Now that kind of dirty read can cause problems depending on your business logic. So this is the architecture choice that suits very well to application where there is the business logic relies on data to be correct. Next slide. So let's talk about some of the particular customers that have seen success with it. So we have this major energy provider, which has a lot of data and event coming through from multiple grids in their infrastructure. That all that data is co-located and collated in GemFire and then serviced back up to draw some intelligent questions that they have to answer. So GemFire system can actually take all this data, which is a very highly frequently changing data, and then do some lightweight analytics on it, and then give a response back that what they should be doing next. This kind of system requires a high volume to be congested and ingested by a system, and then does analytics on it. So this particular use case, we had hit around 200,000 hits per minute. Now, Tanzu GemFire is capable of doing far more, but for this particular use case, 200,000 were enough, and we were able to easily handle that. So they tried this kind of architecture or this kind of requirement from a SQL-based system, which was never designed for this volume. So this was a perfect system to be using GemFire. Next slide, please. Another use case, which I talked about in the previous slides, what's your copay? This is a major healthcare provider, which actually does a lot of capturing of member-related information from copay to other things in GemFire. And then these are serviced to various microservices, not just their website, but other services like their customer application or, their customer center application, where members could be calling up, looking for some information, asking for help, asking to change the data. All those things are stored in GemFire and then stored in a backend system. So all these different plethora of microservices get serviced their domain-specific data through GemFire. So this kind of domain-driven design, which is based on microservices architecture, is perfect for GemFire. This is why we designed the system for. So they were able to actually increase the throughput, reduce the latency for the use cases when they started using GemFire as a service. Next slide, please. Another thing that we have seen quite a lot in the wild is the high availability design of the system. So as I mentioned previously, this is like a multi-leader kind of system. That means one single server going down or a member going down in a cluster of GemFire, it's not going to have an effect on an application. Not just that, it's also availability zone aware. So if the availability zone goes down, which could be a single switch, so that means some number of servers are going to go down, but we shard the data or divide the data in such a way that the primary copy and the secondary copy is never on the same availability zone. So it's easy, aware, and can handle failure there. But we have a third level of availability, which is across a data center or across geolocated data centers. And there, if an entire cluster goes down, let's suppose the entire data center caught fire, God forbid, but that happened. So you can have an active system, which is asynchronously replicating data across the clusters, making sure that your application can still serve the data. And that is the third level of high availability. Now that is quite a useful feature for a lot of applications. We have seen quite a few financial firms use this kind of pattern. Specifically, I say financial firms because they have requirements around compliance where the data can be. So some of the data has to be in Europe, some of the data has to be in North America. Next slide. Now, I'll just go through some of the technical patterns. So one of the most famous technical pattern that I've seen, what we call as leukocyte cache pattern, where the application, that's a Spring Boot application, is accessing a data store like a MySQL store or Postgres, and accessing data. While they do that, they can also store that data in Tanzu GemFire and then service the repeatable reads from the cache this is where Tanzu GemFire works more like an in-memory cache and can serve up data. And every time there is a cache miss, the application can go to the data store, pick up the data, update the cache, and serve up to its application. Now, in a Spring or Spring Boot application, this can be done with a single annotation, add cacheable annotation, extremely handy and useful. And this actually particularly fits well in two business use cases. One is slow changing data that doesn't change that frequently. And second is pub sub. So if you have some kind of eventing model or pub sub kind of use cases, this pattern works really great as well. Next slide. Based on the same pattern, there is HTTP session state caching. That means you have these login information, or this is your Jetty or Tomcat session state. You're simply caching it transparently on GemFire, and my daughter walks in asking me a question. That's life in COVID. And then basically that means that application servers can actually store a lot of this data transparently to caches like GemFire, and users don't really have to do quite a lot here. Libraries like Spring Session takes care of a lot of this mechanics of how the data would be stored in the cache and serviced up. Next slide. Now this is our latest offering, Tanzu GemFire for Kubernetes. This is based on an operator pattern. So that means a operator controlling a bunch of CRDs can spin up easily GemFire cluster on top of Kubernetes. Persistence is managed. Although GemFire is an in-memory database, it can back up its data transparently on disk. So you can use PVCs to actually manage a lot of this data, which is sort of works like a backup for you in case you lose the entire cluster. It can be easily run on any upstream compatible Kubernetes distribution, that is Azure, Google, and VMware's distribution, or Amazon. And we will have options to do out-of-the-box integration for application platforms like Tanzu application platform or Tanzu mission control. That will be coming soon in the future. Next slide, please. Specifically, things to come in. One of the top integrations that first integrations that we're going to be submitting is the VMware Tanzu observability integration. What that means is that as soon as you create a cluster, in a quick one step, you will have a ready-to-go dashboard created for you, which will show you a amazing number of data points that you can actually measure and event on and set up alerts on, and basically observe your GemFire cluster. There will be more development there. The first version, I think Nick has something right now working, so he can actually show you. This is the first time we're showing this observability. So good luck to us. And the next one, which we'll be developing soon, is going to be how to do alerting there and how to monitor multiple or collection of GemFire clusters in just a single view, and how to drill down from collection all the way to a single cluster. Next slide.
No pressure, but we do have a 100% success rate with live demos on this show so far.
There you go. Now there's no pressure. So the next one capability, which is coming out very soon, this is pretty much done in the open source side, is Redis APIs. What does that mean? Tanzu GemFire already is compatible with a set of GemFire clients. Now we have developed a Redis API compliant server component. That means you can actually have a Redis tenant within GemFire doing replication, which is consistent in nature. Redis's cluster replication is actually based on Sentinel protocol, which is in the CAP theorem is a highly available replication system. So you actually get the benefit of consistent replication and the multi-DC replication or multi-geo replication by GemFire using Redis applications. So you have no changes or no impact on the application side. You simply point your Redis application to GemFire and it will work the way it is, and provides the security benefits, which is GemFire's one of the focus areas of GemFire, and high availability, which favors consistency, and doing TLS via GemFire. So all these benefits you will get out of these Redis APIs. So that's going to be coming out soon in the next 3 to 6 months too. I think that's pretty much it. And we would love to take you out for a demo now. And this is a live demo. So good luck, Nick.
Yeah, no pressure. Thanks. Yeah. I'll go ahead and share my screen and walk you through Tanzu GemFire. And really, I'm going to speak to more the install, setup, how you would spin up a cluster, how you would then view the metrics in Wavefront, and then also just a bit about scaling and how you might scale. So a little more operator focused, or someone that would be doing that install and setup process, but also the dashboard's a little more geared towards the developer side. So let's get right into it. We did just release our first 1.0 of the Kubernetes side of GemFire. So this installs onto TKG and Google. I'm going to do it in Google right now. It does install onto the other ones. Right now we're working on certifying all the ins and outs of them. I've done a little bit of the install already, so I'm going to kind of gloss over that, but setting up a namespace and some secrets to pull from my registry. I'm going to drop right into the Helm installation. So I'm connected to my GK cluster. I have a cert manager installed, which is a prereq, and I'm going to use Helm to install the GemFire operator. And if you aren't familiar with the operator pattern, it's basically a mix of a custom resource definition and a set of controllers. In our case, we're using one controller, and that controller and a custom resource gets installed into Kubernetes. So within Kubernetes, you have your API server that is your communicator. You drop in your custom resource definition. It's a big YAML file saying, hey, Kubernetes, here's a thing that you should know about. And then you have a controller, which when you get a YAML file about that thing, that controller goes and builds the necessary components and really all the operational intelligence for those for that product would be baked into that controller. And I'll speak to those in a little bit. So if we look at what we deployed here, we're going to see that we have a GemFire system operator controller running in a pod now. So we've done that. And then I promise you there is a CRD as well. And there is our GemFire clusters CRD. So we've now done that step, installed. We're done, super simple. We're going to go ahead and create a GemFire cluster now. And again, for this, I've done some of the namespacing and the secret pulling. So we're set on those steps. And I'm basically going to hand this the YAML file. That's that simplified version of the CRD. It's the minimum required value set that we need. And mine happens to be in a file already. Oh, of course, I didn't give it the right namespace, so we'll do that now too. And I'll just have one in my default namespace also. So let's go ahead and we can look at the namespace of GemFire cluster and see that it's starting to spin up a GemFire cluster named NV, Nick Vallely. And we'll have a locator going. The other thing we're going to do, because it takes a minute to pull those images, literally about a minute, is we're going to install the Wavefront proxy and collector. Now, Wavefront, for our integration with Wavefront, which hopefully you all know Wavefront. I think there's also been Tanzu Tuesday regarding Wavefront, but it's a SaaS APM tool that you can take all of your metrics and logs and even tracing stuff in the newer versions to this SaaS instance of Wavefront. What we've built and what will be soon released, but not yet, is a GemFire tile for integration. This kind of walks a user through how to set this up. Within the setup, there's a link to instructions. I'm just going to walk through those now. It's a simple Helm install as well. I've already added the repo, and really all I need to do is create the namespace. So I'm going to do that now. And then I'm going to do my own Helm install command and talk you through that for a second. So this just installs Wavefront on this cluster. And specifically, I'm pointing at my instance with an API token that I've hidden and given it a cluster name of a Tanzu Tuesday demo. And this will be installed in that namespace I just created. So as that's going, we'll take a look and see how our GemFire install is coming along. So let's just do get pods all namespaces.
I have a question, Nick.
Yeah.
What's a locator?
It's a good question. So a locator and a server, a locator is your GemFire's load balancing mechanism. And it also does some management responsibilities, but it doesn't serve data. So on a locator, it's going to help work through that thing that Pulkit talked about earlier. So your clients don't have to know about the actual cluster, the data, or which node to connect to. The locator handles all of that for you. So that's what we have going on with a locator, and then servers are what serve up data that store the cache and data in memory. So it looks like those are both running, and our Wavefront proxy is running or close to being running. Let's look at it one more time.
What about the ones with image pull errors?
So that's when I ran it in the default namespace where there isn't a secret to connect to my registry. So I wasn't, I can delete them later, but it was an accident. The default namespace, you probably shouldn't put stuff there, so I didn't, but I accidentally ran it. And now everything is almost up and running. We're still waiting on that to set up. But while it's doing that, I'll walk you through our dashboard. And you would only have to install dashboards once for your instance. And this is a dashboard developed explicitly for a developer. It is a view into a single GemFire cluster. And I'll go to one that actually has data on it so you all can see. But it really walks through the nuts and bolts of GemFire and the information you would care about as a GemFire developer, or even sometimes as an operator of GemFire. And in this case, you can navigate to any Kubernetes cluster you have installed that Wavefront proxy in. So that Helm install I just did, anywhere, any Kubernetes cluster, the namespace that you're working in, and then the cluster name. So when I handed it this, I also gave it a name of NV GemFire. So we're going to see that pop up in our dashboard. And I'll probably have to actually refresh to see the Tanzu one in here once that proxy finishes. So in the meantime, we'll take a look at this and I'll talk you through this. Effectively, you have the ability to see, how many servers and locators you have, what sort of regions are akin to tables. You can see utilization metrics within here. You can see GemFire specific indicators for like health of the system, as well as performance numbers for throughput of, if you're doing gets and puts and cache hits and misses. And then more specifically, getting into other features of GemFire, it's really full of features. And we have functions that can allow that data to be manipulated right there in the cache. We have query language, we have different queues, and as Pulkit mentioned, persistence. So you can monitor all of that for any given GemFire cluster. And let me look at the Wavefront proxy seems to be having some problems for us today. So we're gonna hold off on that, but you wouldn't see much data anyways. It would look approximately like this, where it's somewhat empty over the last time period. So that's roughly what that looks like. I'm gonna also show you how we might scale and really why you would scale, right? So by default, our, let me pull this over actually. our YAML looks about like this. So when you handed that kubectl apply GemFire YAML to Kubernetes, it looks like this. I've added this right here, which would increase my replica count to 4 for my GemFire cluster here. So if I hand this file over to Kubernetes again, and just do that, I've just saved it with the 4 instead. And in this case, I've got NV, so I'm looking at a different file. Give me 2 seconds. So if I copy this and I go, before I do that, let's do, okay. That is that. Okay. So let me do this. All right. So it looks like it's actually spinning up a brand new one because I had a cached NV. So I'm going to change this to NV and scale this one as well. And that's in GemFire for Kubernetes. All right. Give me 2 seconds. Yeah, that was today. All right, perfect. So let's try this command again. All right, so that actually updated you get view all of it here. And so here's my new cluster coming up, and here is the NV cluster that actually did scale to 4 servers. So effectively, that's all it takes to scale a cluster is just bump the replica count of servers within that cluster. Now, there's a bunch of other options within our CRD that are detailed out in our documentation. And you can, for instance, turn on and off the metrics portion of what we just saw. You can run a certain amount of locators. You can vertically scale them via memory or CPU. You can change out your persistent volume storage class, which is necessary for certain vendors of Kubernetes. And then you can also, if you're really kind of a GemFire nerd, you can go in and change options and parameters for the JVM and or GemFire itself in order to, tweak out the GemFire instance and all of its configuration that it has. So realistically, why you would want to scale is you'd be monitoring your dashboard and you'd uncover that maybe your current client connection count is a really high number per server that you have running. And in that case, you're going to start hitting thresholds. You'll start seeing CPUs spike, limits happen there. And then you'll want to add a new node. It would be one of those things that, as you're hitting the Black Friday timeframe, your app is going to need a little more data a lot faster. And so the more you can scale, and eventually we want to bake in kind of the more automated scaling based on thresholds that happen. But right now, it's as simple as upping this number and applying that YAML, and that'll spin up that server. So that's a brief demo of everything that Pulkit talked about and kind of what we have for 1.0.
Nick, I have a question. What's the impact of this scale up, scale down on applications which are running and using this data from GemFire?
Sure. With regard to any application and really the logic that we've baked into the operator, scaling up or scaling down is a little bit trickier just in terms of how to handle that on the operator side. It was a lot more work for us to figure out. But we're going to do a lot of things that you would have to do as an operator without Kubernetes programmatically for you. So we're going to scale appropriately that new node. the application is just going to benefit, and the load balancer, the locator, is going to point it to that new node that's available when the other ones are now hitting that threshold, and it's going to properly load balance. So there would be really no impact to a user of your application as you scale up. As you scale down, depending on the size of data you have, it might get more complicated because, you know, as you're scaling out, you're consuming data that as you shrink down, you don't have that same availability. So we've programmed it to not lose data and have persistence when there is persistence, when you've specified persistence for it. But all of those smarts, and the other thing we'll do is we'll actually rebalance the data. So as you grow, you got these new nodes that have no data in them, and we'll take the action item to spread the load as best we can when we scale out or when we scale down. As we're losing things, we're going to rebalance and make sure that data is evenly spread, so that as you have client connections coming in, or apps and or users coming in accessing data, they're not going to notice that scaling up or scaling down.
Is that rebalancing done at the operator level, or is it built into GemFire itself?
It's actually done at the operator level. The functionality exists within GemFire, but you're going to have to do that manually. So if you're running this outside of Kubernetes, there's lots of control mechanisms available to you, but you're going to have to actually run those. So we have many customers that actually do this rebalance command as they scale out, but we've baked all that in so that users aren't having to do that. Operators aren't having to write scripts to make that happen. So in Kubernetes, we know that pods can die and things can happen that are going to take certain nodes down, and that's going to be, it's inevitable, right, within Kubernetes. So we've got a program around that, and what we've done is basically enable that rebalance when we need it, because it is an expensive thing to do at times, just in terms of processor and capacity. So it's better to do it at certain points in time when you're scaling out or when you're scaling down.
Right. So I assume you're sort of leaning on the stateful set to do the actual like creation and deletion of the pods, and then you have some extra custom logic that's determining when to do things like that, or to maybe do some kind of drain before actually removing pods, that sort of stuff.
Correct. Yeah, we do utilize stateful sets. We also utilize different services within Kubernetes. We utilize the PVCs, persistent volume claims, for our standard disk, and then we also give instructions on how to do load balancers, kind of as a front end to access certain REST APIs if you want to do that from a remote standpoint.
And then another question I was thinking about, so you've got the operator. Do you have a way for someone to test out GemFire who may not be a cluster admin and may not have the permissions to deploy CRDs and create an operator? Or is it pretty much if you want to run this on Kubernetes, you need to be a cluster admin to at least get that initial portion done?
Yeah, right now you'd have to be a cluster admin, but that's really simple. If you spin up a kind or a Minikube locally, you can install this locally onto your developer laptop if you want. You don't have to be running in a GKE instance like I did. You can run it locally, and you'll have that access from that perspective to install the operator and spin up a GemFire cluster.
Cool. And then if somebody wants to kick the tires and play with Tanzu GemFire, what's the easiest entry point, assuming that they may not already have an existing VMware account or something to log into to download things? Is there other paths for people to get to it and try it out?
So within VMware, obviously, you can Slack our team
right.
of Tanzu GemFire. Really, if you go to network.pivotal.io, we will change the URL at some point. GemFire for Kubernetes is right there. and access to this release is available to you. Pulkit, do you want to add any detail to that?
Yeah, we don't require any kind of licensing key or anything like that to use GemFire. You can actually download and use it. If you're evaluating, feel free to reach out to any of our Tanzu representative and they can retrofit any kind of licensing or whatever that you need. But if you're a developer, you just want to kick the tire, feel free to download and kick the tires. It's available. And then that's just the Kubernetes version. But then we have the GemFire jar file version also available to you to do things in your IDE. All it requires is Java. So that means if you use running Mac, Linux, Windows, whatever, as long as it has Java installed, it's going to run. These are fairly lightweight applications. If you're running GemFire locator and server in the background and they're not doing anything, they don't consume a lot. Forget about a lot at all. So like, unlike a lot of databases, like when you run it, you actually know that you're running it. GemFire, you won't. It's extremely lightweight. So I would say at least you have two options available to you. If you're evaluating on Kubernetes platform, feel free to just go to network.pivotal.io and start there. Feel free to evaluate, reach out to us post evaluation, totally fine. There is no key or anything like that. There is no phone home or anything like that, which we require.
Cool. And then given we have a fairly large audience of Spring developers, do we have good integration in Spring Cloud?
Absolutely. Not just Spring Cloud, the Spring ecosystem. We have, I dare to say, one of the best integrations on the in-memory databases when it comes to Spring. We have our own Spring Boot library for our open source core Apache Geode. So Spring Boot for Apache Geode has been GA for some time now. We have a Spring Test library to do integration testing and unit testing. So you can actually mock out a lot of these cache objects and GemFire objects using the Spring Test library. And obviously using the Spring Boot library, we have a first class integration with Spring Cloud Data Flow. So you can actually use GemFire as a source or a sink within Spring Cloud pipelines. We have quite a few customers using that kind of pattern to do a lot of Spring Cloud use cases.
Cool. So I can go to Josh's favorite place on the internet, second favorite place, start.spring.io, choose a couple of libraries, and boom, I have GemFire up and running in my Spring project.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Out of curiosity, what does it end up saying if you did a describe on the proxy?
Describe on the I just tore it down.
No, it's too slow.
Yeah,
I was
sorry. I was gonna just redo it. But the proxy didn't ever come up. But that's Wavefront's proxy, not GemFire's. No.
Oh, I know. I was just curious if it was like pod security policies or something.
It might have been. I actually have torn down and I'm actually doing a separate video for the Wavefront integration, so that when it rolls out, we'll have a video showing exactly what I walked you all through. And it was successful 3 times before. So it's probably something I didn't clean up, to be honest.
Paul jinxed it.
I did jinx it. I take full responsibility. So what we should have done, Tiffany, is we should have stopped right then and there and done like a live troubleshooting session on Kubernetes.
I was going to, but then I didn't want to interrupt since he went into other stuff. And then by the time I was going to interrupt afterward, I was too slow.
As the host of the show, Tiffany, it's your prerogative to interrupt and do whatever you want.
Next time.
Next time.
Well, thank you. That was really awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for showing up on your phone over there. Pulkit.
Yeah, I think that's maybe I'm going to do that next time I'm on vacation, is accidentally leave charges behind. So I can't do any work. I can't be tricked into doing work. Although you did still show up to this, so you are kind of doing some work.
Yeah.
Hopefully
you figured out.
Hopefully this is the only thing you're doing all week.
Yes, this is the only thing.
Good.
Well, yeah, this was really awesome. Thank you.
Does anyone have any closing thoughts or final words of wisdom before we close this off? We're all out of wise words. They've all been said. All right, cool. Well, I'll go ahead and play the end sequence and then finish off the stream.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.